Hey guys, Kevin Cleary here with a knife video. Today I'm going to have my full review of the WE Knives 601. Now this is kind of the one that started it all. I saw this initially on 7Ready's channel, which is a cool channel. If you're not subscribed, you should check it out. But he loved this knife totally, and just couldn't say enough about it. And man, that really put a bug in my ear. And it was really from that time that I started kind of watching WE Knives. I started following them on Instagram, and they're doing some really cool stuff. But this knife is sort of the one that got things going for them, and I think there's good reason for that. This is just a really cool design. It's a great balance of traditional with some new innovative or different interesting stuff. I mean, I guess there's nothing here that's never happened before, but they are doing some cool stuff. I won't say too much about that, but I am going to do a full sort of WE Knives video where I just focus on that. Look for that coming up as a collaboration with Vlad from Blades 101. Anyway, back to the point that I want to make, which is very good knife. I didn't get this one right away. In fact, this is the last WE knife I think I've gotten, but it is really well done. So you can expect a pretty positive review here with a couple of little things that may be problematic for some people and are a little problematic for myself. Let's go ahead and get to size and weight, and then we'll switch over to the top-down view. All right, so overall, this knife is 8 and 11/16, so it's a little over 8 and 5/8, so reasonably sized knife. 3 and 13/16 blade, so a little more than 3 3/4 inches, and 4 and 13/16 handle. Again, a little over 4 3/4 inches. Okay, now the weight on this is a very comfortable 4.6 ounces, and this, like a number of other WE knives, is fairly heavily milled inside of this titanium handle. So they're doing a number of things like that that are just pretty classy and pretty nice touches to see on a knife at this price point, and in some ways expected, although not always delivered at the $300 price point. So let's go ahead and switch over to the top-down view, and we'll take a look at the details as well as some comparisons. I know a number of you said you really like that, so look for that near the end of the video. Okay guys, so here we are nice and close on this WE Knives 601, and the way we always do, we're going to start with the blade and kind of work our way down the knife from there. So we've got S35VN blade steel, very, very good steel, great edge retention, great corrosion resistance, and one of the things they shot for when they designed this steel was to have a steel that would sharpen fairly easily, but then still hold the edge really well. So that's kind of a fine line to walk, and they've done a really good job here with S35VN. If you've got experience with it, you know what I mean. So it's actually going to perform even better than its predecessor, S30V. Now, the blade design and the grind itself is pretty interesting. Number one, notice I've got the one with the DLC on the flats and then the satin finished bevels. There are a number of variations, so maybe this one is not your favorite one, but if you go, let's say, over to Blades 101, which is where I'd recommend you get these, and you'll see a number of different blade designs. I mean, the grinds are the same, but where it's DLC coated and where it isn't, and what kind of finishes on it, there are a number of options along those lines, okay? So you may want to check that out. Let's go ahead and deal with some of those things along here. I do have one nitpick about this, and that is if you take a good look at the DLC coated flat on this side, and then you take a look at the flat on this side. Let me show you one more time. There it is on this side. Let's see if I can get the light to not be a pain in the neck. Okay, there it is on this side, and there it is on the other side. Notice it's a little thinner on one side compared to the other. Now it's barely noticeable, and on camera it may not show up that well, but you can tell with the naked eye that one side is just a little bit thinner, which is not ideal, okay? However, it is super hard to notice, and really it's not something that bothers me at all, but I did want to point it out to you, just that little tweak in in tolerances. Now, the other thing that of course everyone's thinking of when they see this knife is what in the world is going on with that secondary bevel. You can see that it starts here at the heel of the blade normally and finishes, goes along the flats, but then as we get into the belly and toward the tip, they just kept that angle and sort of ground this blade like a Tanto style blade, only I guess a zero ground Tanto style blade on a drop point knife. Now that does let's put it this way. There are good things and bad things about that, okay? So on the good side, that does create an extremely strong tip. Also, I think aesthetically, it creates a really attractive looking blade that is doing something we don't normally see. However, there's a reason you don't normally see that, and that is when you grind this way, you end up making this a very, very thick blade. So when you're doing some kind of fine cutting task with the tip, you've got that very substantial wedge, okay, that you've got to deal with getting through any kind of material. And I did do, I went and got an old Tide bottle and just did some, sort of fine cutting work on the Tide bottle and compared it with another knife, actually a couple other knives. And you do notice, right, as you're trying to push this into that hard plastic, it doesn't want to go in as easily. I could still get everything done. And I will say this about this particular grind. There has never been a time where I came across a cutting task and was like, oh man, I'm going to have to go get another knife because this grind does not allow me to finish that job. Okay, so I've never actually had this be a real true problem for me, but it does mean that there's going to be a little bit of a difference in cutting performance. Okay, now for me, the look of this is so gorgeous that I don't mind having, a slight to make that compromise in terms of, cutting or slicing ability out near the tip. All right, so that's the blade. Very, very good, very functional blade, and of course extremely attractive. And I think one of the reasons this has been so popular is just the grind on that blade is so interesting and definitely different than what we're used to seeing. Let's move on now though to lockup and deployment. All right, the detent on this is very nice. Definitely stiffer than other WE knives that I have, and I've had 4 different ones go through my hands. This has been the best detent. Now I will say about that, if you have another WE knife and you like how it functions, you probably won't be disappointed with this. This one is just a little zippier out of the handle. But if you already have a 601 and you really like the way it deploys, don't count on picking up another WE knife and having the exact same deployment. They are a little bit softer on the detent. Now, other than that, they're extremely smooth. These do ride on ceramic bearings, so very, very nice and smooth, very fast deployment. Really, really nice and easy to access that lock bar. Notice how it is milled in there to allow for your finger to kind of get easy access. Also, you can see the stainless steel lock bar insert, which at this point and at this price point we kind of expect. It does have that proprietary pivot. However, don't be too concerned about that because they actually ship the tool you need with the knife. Now, I will say I've carried this and used it a fair bit and I have not at all had to adjust that pivot. It's been absolutely fine. If you remember on the 608 video, I pointed out that I did have to adjust that pivot. Very, very nice, comfortable, and very solid lockup. I really have no complaints at all about lockup and deployment on this guy. What about the handle? Well, of course, again, the handle is another one of those things where it's very, very well done. It's artistic, it's interesting. There's a lot of visual things happening here, the milling lines all the way around, the WE Knives logo on the pivot, the line milled in here. Also, in terms of the work done on this, it is heavily, heavily milled out on the inside, which does lighten this up quite a bit, which is why it comes in at under 5 ounces the way we talked about. What about the pocket clip? Well, 2 screws there, which is different than most of the WE knives we've looked at on the channel. But these pocket clips, they are milled titanium clips, but because they're fairly thin here, they go in and out of pocket really, really well. And I've got quite a bit of carry time on this, and this is a very, very comfortable knife to carry. Now, in terms of ergonomics, when you're using the knife, it pretty much puts you into this position, okay? It really kind of locks you in right there, which is fine, except for certain tasks I would like to come up here, and that really isn't that comfortable. You can see that because of the swedge is carried all the way to the back of the knife, this is fairly thin. So for a light cutting task, maybe you're cutting up a piece of fruit or something, sure, this would be no problem. But if you're bearing down and pushing through wood or cardboard or anything like that, this does get uncomfortable pretty quickly. So I would have liked to see just a nice spot for my thumb to rest in terms of you know, the ergonomics on this. Otherwise though, it's very comfortable. It's comfortable in pretty well any grip you could think of, or any grip that you would need to use this for. I don't have any issues with that. And I will say that in a saber grip where your thumb is into this nice indent that they've created for you, the knife works really, really, really well. It isn't as big as some other knives that we've had, certainly not as big as the 608. So there's not quite as much handle real estate. Okay, the 608 is quite a bit bigger. So yeah, there's not as much handle real estate on this one. But again, it's certainly not bad. One last thing of note, and that is the backspacer. I love the millwork in that backspacer, and I love the way that they've done the lanyard hole. So when you turn the knife this way, it essentially disappears. It doesn't take away anything from the overall design. But then if you are a lanyard person, you really want one on there, you've got a really nice lanyard hole, or space, I guess you could almost call it. I'm not into that, so I really appreciate when a knife is able to get that kind of hidden so that it's not detracting in any way from the overall design. Let's go ahead and pull in some comparisons, and then I'll give you my overall impression. So if you're into this knife and you're really liking it, you're probably kind of watching some of the other WE knives that are out there. This one, of course, I've already reviewed. This review will be coming up. If you're really curious about this, I do have a first impressions video that you could go and watch on the WE 611. This is the WE 608. And again, all of these are extremely good quality, really interesting designs, and I do like that about WE knives. However, they're all fairly expensive, right? You're around that $280 something price point. I got a really good deal on this one, so if you shop around, you may find a better bargain than that. Let's start off with something a little more expensive. This is, of course, the Reate Knives Torrent. This is my favorite Reate by quite a big margin, and it is exceptional. Okay, this is just outstanding. And in terms of, you know, the feel in hand, the detent is a little nicer on this than the WE's, and the multi-row bearing system is really noticeable. You can see a difference for sure between this knife and any of the WE knives. However, consider the difference in price, and consider that most WE knives have more visual stuff going on. So you may, you know, for a lot of people, I think they would say, hey, I'd like this knife with the bright colors and the interesting milling and all of that over this, even though the action may be a little nicer on this one. And I will say it definitely is nicer. All right, let's go the other way, and we'll pull in some more well-known production knives. There is a Zero Tolerance 0560, very well done. Of course, a much bigger knife and a much heavier knife than the 601. A knife that really reminds me of this is the ZT-452. Okay, this knife is, you know, it's sort of, it's long, it's got that very traditional blade shape with the swedge at the top. Of course, blue anodizing, even very thin knives. This knife is actually a little lighter, even though it's quite a bit longer in length, and the action is quite comparable. However, I will say, you know, this is a knife that is very special among ZTs. The action on this is unreal. What else have we got here for you? Oh yeah, here's a fairly large, fairly slim titanium frame lock, the Spyderco TI Military. And you may be, again, more familiar with that, and so that gives you a sense of what kind of size we're talking about. Whoops. And one more budget option, and again, this is more for the fact that people are very familiar with this. Here's a Rat Model 1. You know, these are not in the same category or anything like that, but that may give you a sense for, you know, the size of this knife and how it's going to carry and stuff like that. Overall, guys, this is another win for WE Knives, and I think it makes sense that this was their sort of flagship offering. It is exceptional. It's interesting. It's well done. It's practical. It carries well. Just a really, really overall great knife. There are a couple little things that I picked on there, and those may be issues for you, especially that blade grind. But For me, that's not really an issue. And as I say, there's never been a task that I tried to do and couldn't do. It's just that it makes some things a little more difficult. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we will talk to you soon.